Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. It's time with yourselves this evening. I have got a special guest. I keep saying I'm going to have a guest coming up soon. I had one tonight, but something's come up. But there are a few lined up for the next few weeks. But I enjoy spending time with your good selves as well, responding to your comments and questions. Right, Bruce, good evening. Looking forward to your critical in the positive sense input during the evening. There's been lots going on in politics in Scotland and in the UK as ever, so lots of things to cover. So let's get started. Right, first of all, Mr. Broken Record will remind you of the Scottish Family Party Conference on the 9th of November. It's just in the afternoon, and I will paste the link into the comments, which you will see on YouTube and Facebook. The software's got something floating above where right, there's an annoying help button floating over where I want to click post the comments. Let's see if return does the trick. It doesn't. Right, I'll deal with that in a minute. Anyway, you can find links on our social media. It would be great to see you at our conference. It's always great. It's great because you'll hear about what the family party is up to. You'll hear some other things. Andrew Williams from Christian Concern speaking. There's a drinks reception afterwards that is free. That's included drinks and nibbles. At the same venue. We've got various resources going to be launched. Here are a few of them. So yeah, we've got a few new things to give to you, and you'll meet lots of like-minded people. That's what often people say is the great thing as well. Now, last year our conference was freezing for the first hour or so, but we are guaranteed that's not going to be the case. So it's going to be a really good good afternoon together. So get your tickets, come along, bring a few more people, and we're looking forward to seeing you. All right, the ticket link has appeared now. We're in business. Right, a bit more party business as well. Obviously, as a political party, we have candidates in elections. And we've got 5 at the moment, standing in by-elections. There are lots of by-elections going on in Scotland at the moment. Basically, the reason is a lot of Labour councillors got elected as MPs. So now there's a vacancy in the council, so there's a by-election to appoint a new councillor. So we've got Dawn Smith up in Fraserburgh and District, Phil Reynolds in Central Buchan, Colinton and Fairmile Head, myself, West Fife and Coastal Villages, Danny Smith, and Kilpatrick, Andrew Muir. So if you happen to be in any of those wards, do vote for those candidates. We wish them well in their campaigning. Now, let's get into a few things I've come across this week. This is quite amusing, actually. It's doubly amusing, I suppose. The Amina Muslim Women's Resource Centre is a sock puppet charity. It's funded by the Scottish government, and it's for Muslim women. Now, I suspect some Muslims might think, well, that's really nice of the government. They're funding an organisation just for us, just for our women. Isn't that good of them? But I would say, well, actually, no, it's not. Because the reason this organisation exists is the Scottish government think Muslims have got the wrong values with regard to feminism. So the idea of Amina is to help Muslim women to reject the value system of their community and their religion. That's what it's all about. So I would hope that mainstream Muslims would look at Amina and think, what is the government playing at? This is an attack on our values. It's a charity set up to undermine our values among particularly young women and girls. So anyway, that's a bit of background. But Amina were having a celebration of diversity event. Okay, pretty standard stuff for a sock puppet charity. But it was only open to Muslim or black and minority ethnic women. Right, I couldn't quite see how a celebration of diversity could be only for people of certain races or a certain religion, but you had to be a woman. So I retweeted it with a questioning comment, and needless to say, they blocked us as a result of that. So bye-bye, Amina. We're not going to be seeing your post on X for a little while, but we'll no doubt look you up every now and again to see what you're up to. I mean, that's a classic case of a Scottish government-funded sock puppet charity. By sock puppet, I mean, it looks like a charity as though it's an independent voice, but the Scottish government's got its hand up its whatever, and is actually talking through it, is speaking through it. We're actually going to talk about another one a bit later in this live stream. That's the Scottish Asian Women's Network, I think it was called. There's a bit of a tie in there. So watch this space, see where we end up with that. Right, Elon Musk. Now, I'm going to make a video about Elon Musk this week. is a free speech champion in some ways, but are there some things to be concerned about as well with regard to X? Now, I won't even begin to talk about it, but I'm going to make a video just exploring some of those things. So with Elon Musk, it's generally you're for him because it's free speech, or you're for him because he's sort of pretty right-wing, or you're against him because you're pretty left-wing and you actually don't want freedom of speech. But I've got some other things to say, some more nuanced things. So watch this space for a video about Elon Musk. But he was making the point here, Wikipedia is controlled by far-left activists. People should stop donating to them. Absolutely agree. We have such problems with our Wikipedia page. It's like a hit piece from the Daily Record. It really is poor. It's not so much it's factually incorrect. It's just presented in really pejorative language, really unbalanced, unfair. Yeah, it's a hit piece. So Wikipedia is a problem for us. I wish an alternative would start. So Elon Musk, if you want to spend a few billion setting up an alternative to Wikipedia, maybe that would be a good thing to do. But one of our concerns with Wikipedia is if someone wants to know about the family party, where'd you go? You go to the family party website. And what else comes up? Well, Wikipedia. Let's see what Wikipedia says about it. That's probably the first two places people would go to. But increasingly, if you want to know something about something, what you do, what I'm doing increasingly is you go to an AI system. You ask the AI system. So an AI system will often go to Wikipedia. And so if Wikipedia's got a reputation for being biased, then people who use an AI system, they won't know where the information came from. So that's quite a concern. So as the family party, we're a bit worried with AI because let's say the National, I mean, a really incredibly biased, poor quality newspaper, really, it's a campaigning rag, really. But if something goes in the national newspaper, as far as AI is concerned, and Wikipedia, I suppose, as far as an AI system is concerned, that's been published in the mainstream media. That's been in a newspaper, so that's reliable. So something we say, and we say, well, actually, that's not true. Well, that's not reliable because that's just us. We're not a proper newspaper. So there are issues that we're going to have to look at about that. But yeah, certainly, Elon, quite agree. Big problems with Wikipedia. Let's have a look at this. When it comes to values about women, you would lean towards Islamic values than Scottish government feminist ones. Right, that's a good question. That's a very valid point to make. There's a wide spectrum of Islamic values with regard to family life. I think in general, the culture among Muslim communities is that women stay at home and look after kids. Women having careers is not so much the thing. I've seen research as well that's shown actually Muslim women are the happiest women in Britain. They're the most satisfied with their life. So if by Islamic values, if we're meaning freedom to make their own choices, to choose to be at home with the kids, if that's what they want to do, for that to be celebrated and honored, then we'll definitely go along with that. If there's undue pressure or stigma associated to going to work, having a career, you know, that's not so good. So it's hard to pin down exactly what Islamic values are. But if you're talking about a mainstream Muslim in Scotland, I would say the family party's values would be more towards the mainstream Muslim than towards the SNP's sort of hyper-feminism, I would say. So, Bristol, sure, for example, forced to cover the hair. Well, we don't want that at all. Culture about women not driving. There'd be very, very few Muslims in Scotland who would agree with that. Like, leaving home on their own as well, I wouldn't agree with that. Men can marry multiple women. Absolutely not. That's illegal and should remain so. Now, I say should remain so. You may think, oh, no, what's the point of saying that? There's no moves to introduce polygamy in Britain. Well, actually, there are the beginnings of a movement to honor and recognize multi-partner relationships. And these moves, they're not coming from Muslims. They're coming from the progressives. They're coming from the progressives. So it won't be too long, I think, before we have the likes of the Green Party saying it's unfair that marriage excludes people in polyamorous relationships. Why should they be discriminated against? Just because they're the sort of people who like a relationship with 3 people doesn't mean, you know, they've got a right to marry as much as anyone else. So that's the direction that will come from, rather than from Muslims. So, Mrs. Scorpion, as we always say, it's not good enough. We're not interested in excuses. But yeah, nice to see you. Hope you're coming on to the conference. So, right, budget coming up very, very soon. What is there to say about the budget? I mean, Labour are talking about this black hole in the finances that they're claiming has suddenly been discovered. I mean, I just, that's just not credible, is it? It hasn't suddenly been discovered. I mean, the government finances are not a secret that they have to delve about in and do the sums properly. So this wasn't a secret. This has been known all along. So is Labour correct in saying the government finances are in a real, public finances are in a total mess? Public services are in a bit of a muddle as well. So this is a really very, very difficult budget. Are they correct in saying that? Yes, absolutely. But let's remember, if Labour had been in power for the last 10 years, the public finances would be in an even worse state because they would have borrowed even more. They would have spent even more. They would have had lockdowns for even longer, even harder. And that's been a big thing that's hit the public finances. So Labour, yes, they have taken over a mess. But if they'd have been in charge before, it would have been even more of a mess. I mean, it's a pretty depressing situation, isn't it? So in the budget, the Labour Party is going to have very difficult decisions. Difficult decisions need to be made. They're talking a lot about growth. They want to encourage growth in the economy. But then every single thing I hear them saying they're going to do, they're anti-growth measures. Even things like, giving more rights to workers. Now, workers' rights obviously can be a good thing. That maybe there's some areas where they could sensibly be strengthened, but that's not a pro-growth measure. That's a measure that costs businesses more. That's a measure that makes it more expensive to employ people. Increasing the minimum wage, that's not a pro-growth measure. That's a cost imposed on businesses, and it might result in some jobs disappearing. So I'm not saying, particularly in every circumstance, these things they're doing are wrong. But as like the SNP was saying, we're going to grow the economy. We're very much pro-business. But then you look at every single thing they do is on the other side of the scales. And the other thing with the budget as well, I mean, this is an article from the BBC, typical article, where they go to people and the question is, what's in it for you? It's as though that's the natural way that politics works. When I've done BBC interviews, they've sometimes taken that sort of line with me, and they look at our policies and they present them as, these policies should appeal to families, because families should be thinking, all right, this is going to be good for me. I've got kids. They're going to give us all sorts of things. This is going to benefit me. Whereas that tends to be not the way we present them. We don't tend to present them as, hey, families, we're going to give you a lot more privileges, benefits, tax breaks, whatever, so you should vote for us. That's not our pitch. Our pitch is, this is what we think needs to happen to create a healthier society. So we're not appealing to people's greed, if you like. We're not appealing to them on a selfish level. We're appealing to everyone and saying, this is not about whether it benefits you or not. This is what needs to happen to set the nation in the right direction. With flourishing, stable families, a healthy birth rate, children being brought up without a lot of the problems that are encountering now, etc., etc., etc. And this is a quote from the BBC website. This came up a few times. Listen to this. Right. So Ben thinks the government should do more around the costs of childcare, because in some cases, it's more efficient for parents not to work. How about that for a complaint? So Ben is complaining that in some cases, parents end up with more money if they actually stay home and look after their own kids. And he's complaining about that. I mean, that really is strange, isn't it? I think we're the sole party that challenges this sort of philosophy, the assumption that every parent wants to be away from their children for as long as possible, from as young as possible. And that is the mission of parents. And the job of the government is to enable parents to be away from their own children, say, for as long as possible, from as young as possible. But I don't think that's the best for children. And a lot of parents don't want that. So our vision is to help parents to be able to make the choice to be at home with their children, if that's what they want to do. And in many cases, particularly mothers, it is what they want to do. So we want to make that choice feasible by, for example, transferable tax allowance, increased child benefit, etc., etc., etc. And like nursery places, in Scotland, our policy would be, if, say, the parents have a 3-year-old, they want the 3-year-olds to go to nursery in the morning, but not the afternoon, then they could take the cash instead of the kid going to nursery in the afternoon. Yeah, so we've got various measures to help in that direction. But we'll comment more on the budget when we've got it. Justin Welby. Has this been a mainstream news story? I'm not. It probably hasn't, but it's been mentioned quite a bit online. I remember when Justin Welby became Archbishop of Canterbury. I remember the considerable excitement among evangelical Christians. The message was, this is amazing. He's one of us. One of us has got to the top. Oh, you just wait what's going to happen with the Church of England now. We've got a man who's really on our wavelength in there. This is going to be absolutely fantastic. I'm at the stage now where I've heard that line so many times about so many people that when I hear it and I think, I'm not interested. Come and tell me when they actually start doing something. Come and tell me when they've made a difference. Because what normally happens is there's a great fanfare. Oh, it's so wonderful. Justin Welby, he's our sort of Christian. He's in the top job. Let's see what happens. Yeah, but people get carried away with that. And then what happens in the years to come is the person compromises and waters down and just heads to the middle of the road and becomes totally ineffective and is incredibly disappointing. And that's the story with Justin Welby. So the latest chapter in this story, the latest of many chapters, I don't follow the Church of England particularly closely, but the latest of many chapters is it's now said that gay sex is not sinful. Obviously, the traditional teaching of the Christian church is crystal clear in the Bible, is the opposite. It's the homosexual sexual relationships are immoral, fall short of God's standards, however you want to put it. So Justin Welby is denying traditional Christian belief. I understand he's also, in that case, denying the official teachings of his own church as well. But if I wanted to give Justin Welby a tip, if you want to say that sort of thing, but not be, this is from the Christian Institute. So the Christian Institute, having a bit of a go at him, saying, this, look what Justin Welby's saying. This is terrible. If Justin Welby wants to say these things, but not come under attack from Christians, there's a secret. So I'll tell you what he needs to do. He needs to undergo a career change, and he needs to become a politician. He can become a politician. If he became a politician, if he said, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm standing up for Christian values, and then said, oh, gay sex is not sinful, the Christian Institute would not be publishing an article saying, oh, this politician who's made a big thing about being a Christian, they're now denying central teachings of traditional Christianity. They wouldn't do that. Let's look at case in point, Kate Forbes. So the Christian Institute don't many positive reports about Kate Forbes saying things in line with Christian teaching. We're talking about her faith. But when she said, basically, there's nothing wrong with homosexual relationships, does anyone in the Christian media or blogosphere or whatever say, actually, what she said there, that's out of line with Christian teaching? Apart from myself and maybe a very small number of other people, it seems like the main Christian voices in this area are unwilling to say that. They're unwilling to criticize politicians the way they criticize other prominent Christians. So anyway, yeah, that's Justin Welby. Let's move on. Oh, this is interesting. Alex Salmond, his funeral was today, wasn't it? So yeah, condolences to family and friends of Alex Salmond. But this was the report in the BBC. I think Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh, pictured left. She went over to North Macedonia to accompany Alex Salmond's coffin back to Scotland. And Alex Salmond and Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh, they've been two peas in a pod for quite a long time. They seem to work with each other very, very closely indeed. And it reminded me of a story about, well, Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. I'll just remind you a bit about her story. I think she was in the Conservatives once. Was she in the Lib Dems as well? I'm not sure. Anyway, but she ended up in the SNP. And Alex Salmond, when he was First Minister, and the Scottish government created a charity. I think it was called the Scottish Asian Women's Association or something. Now, it's like the one I said before, isn't it? The Amina Muslim Women's Resource Association. Something like that. Scottish Asian Women's Association. And Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh was made the boss of this organization. So a substantial amount of taxpayers' money was spent on it. And Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh was paid a substantial salary. And the purpose of this organization, in my humble opinion, was to raise the profile of Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh among a particular community in Scotland. For what purpose? well, for the purpose of her getting elected as an SNP politician. And there's another case of this happening in Scotland as well. So the SNP government saw Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. She's someone we want to get elected. She's someone we want to be a candidate for us. So we will create an organization for her to give her a public profile. And then when she's well known, we've given her a bit of a boost. She can then be our candidate and she'll get elected. Would you describe that as corruption? I probably would. I don't know if there's a strict legal definition of corruption. I don't know if we'd meet it. But in terms of misusing public funds for political ends, absolutely, definitely. That is corruption. So that happened with Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. It also happened with another prominent MSP as well by the name of Humza Yousaf, where the SNP government created the Scottish Islamic Foundation that raised the profile of young Humza Yousaf. And then the next thing you know is an SNP candidate, and he gets elected into the Scottish Parliament. Now, Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh, while we're on the topic, I was going to tell you a story about her. I've told this story before, but not for a long time. You almost definitely haven't heard it. Now, when I was in UKIP many years ago, the leader of UKIP was David Coburn, who not a good character. And he had a sidekick called Arthur Misty Thackeray, who, in my humble opinion, not a good character. And one of the first things I went to at UKIP, I remember standing in a pub, and I think it was Arthur Misty Thackeray was explaining that David Coburn, representing UKIP, had been in a hustings with Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. I think they were both wanting to become MEPs at the time, members of the European Parliament. David Coburn succeeded, Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh didn't. So they'd been at this hustings, and he was explaining that David Coburn had deliberately mispronounced her name repeatedly through this hustings, and he kept calling her Trashmina and other variations on the name. And Tasmina corrected him. I think maybe the chairman corrected him as well, but he kept saying, "Oh, sorry, did I get it wrong? Oh, I didn't realize." And then he'd do it again and again and again. It was obviously deliberate. And David Coburn's sidekick there was there explaining, this had all been planned beforehand, and they did it. Wasn't it funny? It was a great laugh. It really upset Tasmina. And I stood there thinking, oh my goodness, what have I joined here? Who are these people? This is just appalling. I mean, it's partly childish and infantile, but it's beyond that. I mean, it's sinister as well. I mean, these are bad characters. It's partly that it's dishonest, and partly that it's just an unpleasant way to treat someone. So I actually watched the thing on YouTube, and it was absolutely right. That's what he did throughout it. So while I was in UKIP, I was basically at war with David Coburn and Arthur Misty Thackeray, because I challenged a few things, and they did everything they could to get me, well, kicked out of the party, trying to stop me standing as a candidate, etc. Anyway, but that's another story. But then what happened is I was invited to go on to the BBC discussion program on a Sunday morning, whose name is eluding me. Was it The Big Question? Yeah, the Big Questions with Campbell. I can't remember his name. Anyway, the Scottish fella, someone other Campbell, was the host. Anyway, The Big Question, Sunday morning. It was in Leith, so I went along to it, sat there in the green room. I think I was going to talk about the smacking ban. And then along comes David Coburn. So I said, hello, that was that. Okay, fine. I wasn't representing UKIP. He was representing UKIP. And then, just before it was going to start, who walks in but Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh? And the thought came to me immediately. I thought, David Coburn has been delivered into my hands here. I thought I could go to Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh. I could have a quiet word in her ear, and I could say to her, look, if you want to accuse David Coburn of deliberately mispronouncing your name in this show, then David will deny it, but I'll back you up. I'll tell you that I've heard that that's what happened. And I was thinking that through. I was thinking, should I do it? Should I do it? There was only like minutes before the show was due to start. I can't remember exactly what happened, but basically I didn't. I think I didn't quite make my mind up fast enough to go and speak to her and to see if she'd be up for doing that. So it didn't quite happen. But if I had have done, I think, well, basically, I wish I had. I wish I had. Looking at the way things unfolded in UKIP in the years to come, I wish I'd done that. I'm no fan of Tasmina Ahmed-Sheikh and her values and beliefs or whatever, not by a long way. But the opportunity to embarrass David Coburn on that one would have been valuable. It's not Alistair Campbell. He's been in the news quite a bit because he made accusations of being abused. Well, I think they're substantiated. I think claiming he was abused at Edinburgh Academy. Nicky Campbell, that's the man. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, Nicky Campbell. Okay, right. Let's move on. All right, the Scottish Tories needed a new message. Has Findlay found it? Well, this article is the BBC website. It's saying basically, it's saying all the freebies that the SNP government prides themselves on, they need to be reviewed and they need to chop a lot of them. Now, the first thing I say, he listed the baby box. I would say out of all the freebies, I've actually got quite a lot of time for the baby box. If there's something you want to celebrate and show that you're encouraging or marking whatever, you're having children, the situation Scotland's in now, that seems like a good thing. I'd have questions about some of the contents of the baby box. Needless to say, it's a little bit politicized or whatever. By the SNP, that's going to be inevitable. But the basic idea of a baby box, I think that idea is quite good. But there are lots of other freebies as well he's looking at and saying, we need to do away with these. So what he's doing basically is doing what a right-wing politician ought to be doing. I mean, the Scottish Conservatives for years have been so weak. I mean, Ruth Davidson was a Lib Dem. She didn't have a Conservative bone in her body. What's his name? Douglas Ross. Did he? Yeah, slightly better, maybe. But it seems like Russell Findlay is going to be a bit more right-wing. And that's obviously, when left-wing parties are saying we're going to give away things like confetti left, right, and centre, a right-wing party should be saying, whoa, we're not sure this is a good thing. So it's more just the Conservatives doing their job, doing what it says on the tin, roughly speaking. But why are they doing it? Is it because this is Russell Findlay's true values coming through, or the Scottish Conservative MSP group have rediscovered their inner conservatism? Not really. I think just they're worried about reform. They're basically trying to cover off reform by actually being properly right-wing. Now, what I'm saying there, it might have made it sound like I think they should be properly right-wing. A lot of these, like on these freebies, the SNP's policy, we don't have, we're trying to stay out of the basic right-left debate. All these freebies, our policy would be case by case. Baby box, I actually think that's a good thing. Now, we've got the wedding box as well, we would add in. Some of the other things, we would consider them case by case, rather than saying we've got an overriding principle that we're going to bring to bear on it. So that's been interesting there. And carrying on with the same theme, Conservative leadership election, which we're entering into the very final stages of. The thing I wanted to pick up here on this, the same idea actually of trying to cover off reform. Now, Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch, they're both coming across as the fairly right-wing, fairly conservative and culturally conservative candidates. But Robert Jenrick, I've read articles where people are saying he was absolutely middle of the road, pretty bland, middle of the road, conservative, moderate, not too long ago. But now he's in this leadership election, appealing to the Conservative membership with a view to fighting off the challenge from reform. He's suddenly become, a bit of a fiery right-winger. Kemi Badenoch's always been outspoken, and she's always been pretty conservative. But again, I read the article the other day when it's saying if you look at what she actually did when she was a government minister, she passed all sorts of things, like race pay equality policies, all this sort of thing. Just absolutely the opposite of the impression she gives in her sound bites. So with both candidates, I think there's, certainly in my mind, there's quite a significant question mark about the degree to which they actually believe the political positions that they're now espousing. The question mark is, are they playing to the audience and playing to their current scenario as being under threat by reform? So that's a very significant question mark there. But about all these people, this is my punchline really: Russell Findlay, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch. I've been talking about reform as well, and the Reform Party. The thing I'd emphasize about all of them is they're not social conservatives. They're cultural conservatives. What's the difference? You may say. Cultural conservatives, that they can drag their heels over new things. They like things to say. They don't want too much immigration because that changes things. They don't like this newfangled transgender thing. 10 years ago, they didn't like same-sex marriage because that was the newfangled thing. But that was 10 years ago, so they've forgotten about that. So now that they're not too keen on the transgender thing. I mean, in the 60s, they probably would have been against the Abortion Act coming in, but they've forgotten about that now, because that's a long time ago. So they're now dragging their heels about other things. Whereas social conservatives come at issues with principles like every human life has inestimable value and therefore should be treated accordingly. That's the principle of a social conservative. And that's what's missing in cultural conservatives. But all that, like Russell Finley, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, Reform, they're not social conservatives. So the family party is very distinct there. So, yeah, I think the baby box, in terms of the value of the things in it, I think that's not particularly significant. But the idea of giving people something to mark, and the idea that you're going out of your way to try and help new parents, I think that's a good thing. You could say, would it be better just to give them a grant, to give some money? Well, maybe in some ways. The thing with the baby box is quite high profile. So I think it communicates a message from the government that we're really pleased you had a child and we want to help. And I think that message is good. Generally, giveaways, like the Scottish government's been spending ridiculous amounts of money to give away bikes to children, that sort of thing. I really don't think it's a good idea. I mean, how much are children's bikes in a charity shop? About £10. I mean, basically, any kiddie who wants a bike can get a bike. Children's bikes are really, really cheap. And the idea that the government's going to get more people cycling by giving bikes away to children, yeah, I don't think that's a good use of money. Right, Doug, that's an interesting point. The baby box does indeed contain condoms. Now, I made a big video about this a while ago, and I said the fact that there's condoms in it, it's almost giving the message, okay, we understand you made a mistake this time, but please be more careful next time. It seemed like that. So I made a video saying that, and a few people upbraided me and said, well, no, that's right. That's not right. The point is that getting pregnant too soon after having a baby is not recommended. So provided the condoms is more from the point of view of wait an appropriate length of time before getting pregnant. So I can see your point, Doug, and I agree with it, but I think there's another side of the argument as well with it. Right, the Heritage Party is truly socially conservative. It is indeed. The Heritage Party is socially conservative, but it is certainly its leader, and I think generally the tone of its pronouncements goes into every conspiracy theory going, chemtrails, 5G, the lot. And also, in my humble opinion, the leader, David Curtin, is anti-Semitic. I don't say that lightly. I've looked in, followed his social media posts closely for a substantial period of time, and I think there's no other way of interpreting it. He's anti-Semitic. So I think that's a very serious issue. Okay. Right, lots of comments tonight. That's great. Sheila. Right. Totally agree with the Royal. In the selfish way many people vote, that's how the SNP was held in Scotland. They promised sweeties. People ignore the draconian anti-free speech hate laws. I think that's absolutely right. I think the culture in the UK and in Scotland, the culture is that you approach politics from the what's in it for me point of view. And I think the media encourage that. The BBC encouraged that as well. Like on budget day, so how is it going to affect this person and that person? And they can do their complaining or whatever. It's not, a common good type of approach. So I absolutely agree. Right, what have we got next? Oh yeah, this is something to mention. This is another family party thing, but I'm just going to mention it now because you might be interested. Over the summer, I spoke to a few people, and I kept hearing the same thing. When I say I kept hearing it, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. And people were saying, Christians, they were saying they're involved in pro-life activism, or they're involved in the family party, or in the Christian Institute, or whatever, these sort of organizations. And they feel sometimes when they go to their own church, they feel that they're sort of a bit of an alien. They don't quite fit in. If they talk about what they do, about, for example, their pro-life activism, the friends at church, other people at church are quite likely to sort of go a bit blank and don't quite know what to say, don't really understand it. And people go to church and they listen to the preaching week after week after week. And in some cases, they don't hear anything that encourages them or connects with, for example, their pro-life work. So I've seen this from a lot of people. Eventually I thought, right, it's time to do something about this. So come up with this event. It's going to be a convocation. Con meaning with, vocation, a calling. So with calling, with the same calling. So it's a gathering together of Christians with the same calling to, pro-life, political, moral issues, this sort of activism. And it's going to be sing some hymns. There's going to be a couple of speakers. The speakers are going to talk about their experience as Christians working in this area. That's basically the theme. We've got a couple of speakers lined up. One of them is Callum McKellar from the Scottish Council for Human Bioethics. The other one is Nigel Kenny from the Christian Institute. So this will happen 7:30 p.m. Thursday, the 28th of November, Christopher Community Church. And it's just going to be one every few months. We're going to do this one in Edinburgh. Maybe the next one will be in Glasgow. Then we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I haven't got any grand vision. I'm planning to introduce it for 5 minutes. Then other people will take over and basically lead the meeting. Anyway, but so if that sounds interesting, come along. Take a screenshot of that, get the details. We'll put them on Family Party social media as well. But hopefully this is going to be something that's valuable to some people. The other thing as well, we're hoping this will attract people from all types of churches, You'd be very welcome to come along. Now, we're trying to avoid things that people of various Christian traditions would find particularly alien. We don't want anyone to be thinking, oh, what's that? Or I don't. So we'll try and keep it in the common ground. Let's put it that way. So, Convocation, come along if you can. Right, Labour suspends MP after video appears to show him punching man. It appears to show him. Unless there's some AI simulation, he absolutely whacks him one and then continues to thump him when he's down on the ground as well. So what is there to say about this? The thing I would say about this is, how many people do you know who have got into trouble for viciously attacking someone in the street? I'm struggling. I don't really know anyone who's been in that sort of trial. I can't think of anyone in any case. So why is it the political parties seem to be able to attract such a high proportion of people who get into all sorts of very serious problems? Violent incidents, you get sort of prostitution, pornography things, drunken incidents, dishonesty in their finances, and their personal. It really is quite remarkable. I sometimes think, how do they get these people? Where do they find them? I think there is how would you put it? A sort of moral rot, if you like, at the core of a lot of political parties. Is it the politics that just attracts the wrong sort of people for some reason? I'm not sure. I don't think the Family Party does, but I just find it remarkable the number of these problems that come up among a relatively small number of members of Parliament, members of the Scottish Parliament. Just something needs explaining. This is not run-of-the-mill expectation of this sort of bad behavior. There's something going on that's resulted in an over-representation of politicians in various types of misbehavior. So answers on a postcard. Any suggestions about that? Then something is creating this situation, and I don't quite know what it is. Right, John, the torchlit procession, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Yeah, power is a very powerful incentive. It is, yeah. So if you imagine, for example, you're the Labour Party, you're selecting candidates, but I guess maybe they don't know people very well. If you're a political party, someone comes along and have a drink in the pub, there's the social side, you come along, you deliver some leaflets for them, you keep your nose clean on social media, that you deliver, go through an interview process, and people think you seem fine. But maybe people don't know them enough. Or do they overlook it? Do they do, as many parties have done, they look at the people, let's say they've got 5 candidates, they'll look at the 5, they'll think, actually, we think he's got the most chance of winning. He's a bit more charismatic, he's got a bit more energy, got some good connections, he's going to put some money into the campaign. I think he's got most chance of winning. I'm a bit concerned about his character. When we have heard those things, And, his behavior wasn't brilliant sometimes, but we really do think he's got the best chance. So let's go with him. Maybe that sort of thinking is going on. That's how you get people like Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Okay. So I always forget to say this. Do share this. Do hit share, whatever social media platform you're on. Do hit share. And just now we've got more people watching. Quick reminder, Scottish Family Party Conference. Get your tickets. It's a week on Saturday. I guarantee you will really enjoy it. So get your tickets, and it would be great to see you there. Right, where am I up to? We've done that. Right, Tommy Robinson. I need to talk about Tommy Robinson. This is one of the subjects where I feel like there's a lot to say, and I feel like I need to say it all in one go than just a few little bits. But I'm not quite going to manage to say everything I'd have to say about Tommy Robinson. But he's in prison now, and the story basically, as I understand it, is he was in. There was a case years ago where there was a bullying incident in a school somewhere in the north of England, where it ended up with a Syrian refugee boy was maybe attacked too strong a word, but had water poured over him or whatever by a white British boy. And this was immediately pounced upon as a racist incident. This is horrific. Look, this is how asylum seekers or whatever, refugees have been treated in Britain. Isn't this appalling? And this became a worldwide story. It was discussed at the G7 or something, became an international issue. Now, difficult that this may be to believe, the headmaster ended up losing his job, and the school it happened in was shut down. The school was shut down. So the narrative immediately, a bit like the George Floyd thing, a bit like the Sheikh Obeyo, a bit like this, whatever his name, Kaba was shot last week, because white native against refugee, this grass, we're going to make this into a story to show how racist and hostile and horrible Britain is and how we need to fight against the far right. So this narrative was created. And what Tommy Robinson did was he went along to the local area and spoke to the people directly involved, the people who knew the boys, and tried to find out what was happening. Now, I guess I need to be careful about repeating some of the claims, or I might be in trouble. But basically, Tommy Robinson came to the conclusion that actually the boy who poured water over this refugee boy actually was not justified, but the refugee boy had behaved in ways that would cause someone to mistreat them. Let's put it that way. That his character and behavior previously had been very poor. That's what Tommy Robinson claimed. And this went to court, and basically it was rejected. So Tommy Robinson was prosecuted or whatever for saying these things about this boy, and the court decided that these things weren't true. So Tommy Robinson was told, right, you've got to pay damages or whatever, but you cannot repeat these claims. You're not allowed to repeat them. So what Tommy Robinson did is he went to the people who told him the things, and he spoke to them again, and he secretly recorded them, explaining about the way this boy had behaved in the past. And he made it into a documentary, which you can watch on X. I've watched it. So there's multiple people who knew the boys involved, basically backing up what Tommy Robinson had claimed in court. Now, my personal take on this, my take is that I believe that what Tommy Robinson was claiming about this boy is true. I think the evidence he presents in this video is overwhelming. So I think that's the case. So the decision in that court case, for whatever reason, I think it was wrong. I think what Tommy Robinson was claiming was true. That's the impression I've got by looking at the evidence. Now, what happened in the court? I think it's quite possible that the judge was feeling that his duty was just to be against Tommy Robinson. That would generally be what you'd expect from the police, from the legal system, sadly. So, two-tier policing, I would believe it would be being treated, very possibly treated unfairly there. But then what's happened is Tommy Robinson's come back to Britain, and he was told, by the court, you cannot keep repeating these claims, but he's kept repeating them. Now, rule of law, I mean, should you be allowed to do that? So inevitably, they've come down on him like a ton of bricks, because he knew full well he was breaking the law, that he'd been told he can't say things, but he said them in any case, so he's been sent to prison. So I think this latest legal case and the sentence handed down, I don't think there's really a case that there's been some sort of bias there. You could say he's been sent to prison for 18 months while they're busy letting violent offenders out because the prisons are full. You can make that sort of point. That might be a valid point to make. But Tommy Robinson has certainly had done something illegal, brazenly illegal and provocative in repeating these claims. So that's the score there. It's an interesting situation. Now, my take on this, the way it appears to me, is that the original court decision was wrong, that they refused to accept what was convincing evidence that what Tommy Robinson was saying was true, because they wanted to stick to the official narrative. I think that's what's gone wrong there. But what does this achieve? What this achieves is makes Tommy Robinson into a martyr, because he has appeared to be mistreated, because he's been trying to state things. I mean, in this video he made, he doesn't even say the things. He just plays recordings of other people saying the things. So it does appear, I know he's going to get a lot of sympathy from this, and I think the legal system has, their persecution of him, if you like, has backfired. It will make him into a martyr figure. And to be honest, to look at a situation where the truth's been suppressed in order to fit a particular narrative and to try and get the other side of the story, is that a valuable thing to do? I think it absolutely is. So that's great. Right, wider things to say on Tommy Robinson. I would say it's maybe worth remembering that people can change. I think maybe he's mellowed slightly. I haven't followed him particularly, but I think he's mellowed slightly over the years. But my big issue with him, well, two big issues. I suppose one is his manner, which often sounds like he's more keen to start a fight rather than to start a debate. And the other issue is, I think most of what he says is true. Most of what he says is true. But when you're in the area of Islam, immigration, it's a minefield, and it's so sensitive because you're dealing about people and you don't want to generalize. But so you need to be really careful the way you speak, and you need to be very sensitive the way you speak as well. Otherwise, it's inflammatory or unfair. I think Tommy Robinson falls into those traps quite frequently. The other thing he does is his social media can sometimes just be a string of bad things done by people who are not white, or bad things done by immigrants, which again, I've got a problem with that. I could set up a social media account and just fill it with bad things done by red-haired people. And if you follow that account, by the end of a few months, you'd probably be thinking, oh, these red-haired people, oh, they're bad news, aren't they? If you see a red-haired person, you'd be thinking, oh, right, it's just, you can stir up hostility against any group by feeding people with a diet of bad news stories about that particular group. And I feel that that's what Tommy Robinson tends to do with his social media as well. So certainly not someone I'd wish to associate with, but I think it's quite interesting what is happening there. And I think it appears to me that he is the victim of an injustice based on that first trial. And I don't know if he can appeal that based on the video evidence that he's got. I would guess he can't, otherwise he would have done. So not quite sure what's happened there. Right. Now, Tommy Robinson speaks to many people's feelings rather than what they think. Yes, that's maybe a perceptive observation. I think a substantial proportion of his following is unpleasant characters. I think there would be some people who'd be quite violent, angry, racist, up for a fight type people, a substantial number like that. Tommy Robinson, one other thing to be aware of, I think it's very interesting. I mean, he's got how many followers, how many supporters, or people who think favorite, 1 million maybe in Britain. I think the Reform Party is vulnerable on its right wing, because the Reform Party really enthusiastically distanced themselves from Tommy Robinson, to the point where they're very hostile to each other. He's very hostile to them. They're very hostile to him. Now, but Tommy Robinson's got a very large following. I believe a party that aligns itself with Tommy Robinson could actually become a significant force. I mean, let's say if Reform got, say, 4 million votes at the last election, I believe that maybe 1 million of those could go to the Tommy Robinson party. And I think the opportunity is for UKIP. And I think they're sort of taking that as well. So I think it's not impossible that, like the Conservatives have got the challenge, they've got Reform on their right wing. I think it's not impossible in the next few years that Reform have a challenger on their right wing that could be a sort of UKIP, Tommy Robinson type conglomeration. And that could be a significant problem for Reform. But we shall see. We shall see how that unfolds. Be careful what you say about Robinson. He stood on a stage and accused every single Muslim in the UK being responsible for 7/7. Yeah, that would be an utterly stupid thing to say. I think that's an example of what I was talking about. That when you're getting into these issues, particularly if you're quite a fiery speaker and speaking off the cuff, then if things come out wrong, that's a very serious matter. So saying something like that, that's an example of what I'm talking about, that you need to be very careful, sensitive, and precise in order to talk about these issues. Sometimes people say, oh, well, no one else will talk about them. But that's not true. They will. There are lots of journalists, etc., who will talk about issues relating to Islam. I'll talk about them. I've talked about them at some length at different points. So, okay. Right, Robert says you're not against immigrants, but the extremists. Yes, yeah, I would say that's what he says. I think what he puts on social media, though, I think it becomes a bit confused sometimes, and I still think the offering a string of bad news stories about basically people of other races or immigrants or whatever is not positive. Right, the Reform Party is a major problem for the Scottish Family Party. Absolutely, I think they'll have already taken a part of our support. In the absence of Reform at the general election, I think our candidates would have been, over 2%, 2 or 3%, who knows, over 2%. In other words, in the progress we're making, I think with Reform, they will take away basically the cultural conservatives, the social conservatives, who are operating from core moral principles. They're going to stay with the Family Party. Cultural conservatives, who might think, oh yeah, I like the Family Party on transgender things. I like them on freedom of speech. I don't really get the pro-life thing. What's this marriage thing? I don't really get that. So those sort of people, they might support the Family Party if we're the only option apart from the mainstream, which we have been sort of in the past. But maybe some of those people will go off to Reform. But there's various ways Reform might go very wrong in the future. So let's see. I won't go into that now, but we will see. Right. Okay, let's move on. How are we doing? Oh, time's flying. Chris Kaba, the violent gangster who was shot by a police marksman in order to stop him trying to ram his way out of a road blocked by police cars. I talked about this last week, how immediately some people on the so hard left, they jump on it, think, please, 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 can we make this into a George Floyd? Please, let's just assume it's a racist incident and let's get the ball rolling and start campaigning and waving banners around. And it was pointed out to me that actually in the Scottish Parliament, a motion was put down basically saying that this was a terrible racial injustice and we need to fight for justice for Chris Kaba. Now, it now turns out, as I say, he shot someone a couple of days before. So who put down this motion? Needless to say, at the forefront of it were the Greens. The Scottish Greens are a racist party. I would say they want to see everything on racial grounds and they want to stir up racial tension. So when they see an issue, criminal trying to avoid arrest in a very dangerous and aggressive way, police marksman shoots him. They're not interested in they don't want to know how fast was he going, how many warnings had been. They're not interested in that. What they're interested in, right, is black. The police officer was white. Right. We understand this issue now. This is a racist incident. Let's hit the streets and push forward our political agenda. So that was the Greens at the forefront on it, but there were also MSPs from Labour and the SNP as well signed this motion. Some of them have unsigned it now. I don't know. Maybe some of the Lib Dems did as well. Probably not the Conservatives. But it just shows you what's ready. Like their fingers on the trigger. These activists, their fingers on the trigger, and they're waiting to find raw material to present as examples of racism. And then the next time something like this happens, really in Scotland, some incident with a black person and the police, they're just itching to pounce on it and present their own narrative of it. So watch this space. Right, a few things on this sort of line this evening. Southport murders accused facing terror charge. So the young man who killed these girls in Southport, which triggered the series of riots across Britain, these are being charged or whatever, and it's turned out that they're classed as a terrorist event. He had an Al-Qaeda training manual, and he'd also been making some poison as well. So Al-Qaeda, so you assume this is like a sort of Islamist motivation. The BBC report said this had been classed as a terror incident and it had been found to have some sort of terrorist manual in his possession. They did not say that it was from Al-Qaeda. The BBC didn't say that. Even though that's the most obvious thing that people need to know about this, the BBC tried to cover that up. So the Telegraph report, terrorist training manual from Al-Qaeda, and others making it clear this is like a Muslim terrorism connection there. The BBC deliberately doesn't say. Now, remember at the riots, they were saying, the riots kicked off, and a lot of people were saying they were assuming this was an asylum seeker, but it wasn't announced. But the rumor could spread like wildfire because people know that if it had been, there would have been moves to cover that up. They'd have tried to delay before they actually released that information, which led to the speculation of being able to spread like wildfire, and then you end up with a riot. Have they learned their lesson? No. So still in this case, the BBC trying to conceal the truth, which just totally counterproductive. So this person, you assume some sort of online radicalization. I don't know. You assume some sort of Muslim motivation. So the issue of Islamist terrorism is a very serious one. It needs to be addressed head on. Obviously, it's a very small proportion of Muslims, very small proportion, but a very small proportion of a very large population is a significant number of people, and there's a very significant problem, and it needs to be talked about openly. Then the general consensus attitude in politics is if we can just cover this up and be nice enough to everyone, then so the jihadists, basically they'll fade away and they'll just blend in with British society and everything will be fine. If we can just keep the lid on Tommy Robinson and people, if we can just stop people making a fuss about this, then it'll just fade away. Well, I don't think it is. It's not going to happen. Right, I think we'll leave that for this week. Again, I've just got one video to show to finish off. Someone mentioned the pro-life march in Glasgow. This was organised by SPUC, SPUC, Society for the Protection of the Unborn Child, and it started with an event in George Square. Then there's a march to the Catholic Cathedral, and then there was a service in there. Stayed for the service as well. How many people were there? I didn't count, but hundreds, many hundreds. I would say, I don't know, 500, something like that. So the march, the candlelit march, was a wonderful sight. It's great to see so many people there. I'm sure if you had half that number of people on another cause, then the media would have been queuing up, and it would have been all over the media. There've been reports left, right, and centre. But for a pro-life event, obviously, the media are not interested. I mean, it just reminds me that a lot of pro-life, some pro-life activists in England see Scotland as the pro-life capital of the UK. Because an event like this, you wouldn't get that anywhere. Maybe in London, where you get a national event, you would, but not in any other city in England. So look at Scotland. I think the pro-life movement is stronger, and we've got a devolved parliament, so that the possibility of making a change is here as well. So some people see Scotland as the great hope of the pro-life movement. Now, being here, you might think, oh dear, that's doesn't quite feel like that here. But well, there are reasons to be hopeful. I'll show you the video in a minute. Just before I show you the video, the Scottish government is having a review of abortion law and process at the moment. And this review has already made it clear in its terms of reference that the only changes that are going to be made will be in the direction of liberalizing abortion policy. So they're saying, we're having a consultation. Everybody tell us what you think. We're inviting your input. But by the way, we've already decided which way this is going. It's going to stay where it is, or it's going to move in the so-called, well, the liberalizing direction. I mean, just the temerity to do that. They should be so embarrassed to say, right, we're inviting opinions, we're calling everyone in, and we've already decided what the result's going to be. But spend hours filling these forms in and telling us what you think, because we really want to make sure we've read what you've got to say before we ignore it. That's what's going on. Anyway, so right, I'll start this video off and then I'll commentate on it in a little bit.
My body, my choice. My body, my choice. My body, my choice. My body, my choice.
Right, I'll turn the sound down there. Yeah, so that was just a handful of ladies who had an impromptu screaming competition as the vigil went past. The lady there, she came up, she almost stuck her nose on my camera while I was just filming there. So I mean, you can see the people walking past. It's really fantastic to see that. But you can counsel me on my dilemma I'm suffering from. So I got this video footage. I thought I'm going to put this on X. I'll put it on Facebook. I want lots of people to watch it. What should I do? I thought, well, obviously, what I should do is take the clip of the woman coming and screaming at me. That was actually at the end of the video. So I took that clip and put it at the beginning. I thought if I put that at the beginning, more people will watch the video. And sure enough, I put that clip at the beginning and 10,000 views on X. I haven't checked how many on Facebook, but pretty wide circulation. But part of me thinks, I don't want to, I'm sort of bored doing that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be taking the most sensational, outrageous, clickbaity thing, putting that on, and that's what gets people to watch. So my dilemma is, obviously I want lots of people to watch. I want social media to be flourishing. I want a big reach. But on the other hand, yeah, I basically don't want to be doing that. I don't want to be just like picking the most outrageous, confrontational little clips or whatever, just to try and get attention. So what's your advice, everyone? What's the alternative? Do I just have to keep doing that? Or is there another way? Or should I just say, okay, if only 200 people are going to watch it, then fine, let's just go with that? Or do you have to put the sensational bit at the beginning? Let me know what you think. It's I say a bit of a dilemma at the moment. Yeah. So you can see from the march, it's quite a crowd going by. It's a good number of people in there. Quite a lot of young people as well. Well, a lot of young people, which is very, very encouraging. So yeah, let's hope they all stay involved with the pro-life movement and really move the issue forward. Now, I said about what the Scottish government's doing. Obviously, they're going to do us a favour. See, the thing we don't want, the worst case scenario for us, is that the pro-life issue, the abortion issue, is just totally off the agenda. Taken for granted, settled issue, doesn't get any attention. Things just carry on the same as they've been for years. That's the worst thing we want. But the Scottish government and the other parties as well, thankfully, they're helping us. Like they did buffer zones. That kept the issue on the agenda, kept us a live issue. Now they're doing this review. And they're going to either remove time limits or decriminalize. I don't know what they're going to do, but there'll be something that keeps abortion in the news. And I think our job is to use that opportunity to keep drawing people's attention to the central issue. So they want to talk about buffer zones. We want to talk about the value of human life. They want to talk about time limits. We want to talk about the value of human life. So it's a matter of grasping the opportunity that's given to us when these things are in discussion, they get in the public debate, to just keep challenging people about the fundamental moral issue that is involved in it. So that's what we're doing there. So if you can make it along to that next year, really do that. That would be excellent. Now there is not similar, but there is some sort of event in Edinburgh coming up very soon. If you don't get the Family Party newsletter, do sign up. Just go to our website and sign up for that, because we've advertised a sort of similar event in Edinburgh as well. So yeah, get the Family Party newsletter and you would find out about things like that as well. That's coming up on Sunday. But if you want to know about that, an event, similar-ish event taking place in Edinburgh on Sunday, then just drop us an email at contact@scottishfamily.org. contact@scottishfamily.org. Yep, I think that's absolutely key. That all the other issues, they're an opportunity to talk about the main issue. that's absolutely what we need to keep doing. I've been doing this for 50 years. Yeah, I was hearing about that. That's very impressive. Press gave up 20 years ago. Usually only turn up when there's a large counter demonstration. Yeah, that's the family parties thing. The media will turn up when there's a counter demonstration. They'll turn up if they think they can present a bad news story about the family party or interview people who are against us or opposing us. If it's just us presenting our message and making our presence felt, then they ain't going anywhere near that. Right. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. There's been a lot of you watching tonight. I don't know if some of you did some share. If you did share the live stream tonight, that's really good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Maybe you could share it afterwards as well. You can get the link from the various social media. You can share that around. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. That's good night.